Good afternoon. My name is Priya Sundaraman, as you just introduced me. I am a principal data scientist from State Farm. Speaking of State Farm, you might know my colleague Jake. So, well, yes, I can confirm that he does wear khakis to work. Anyway, so the talk today, I will be presenting some research that was done by my team on using AI to identify distracted driving. So when I say AI, it's just AI techniques and technologies, computer vision, deep learning, and things like that. Okay, let me get this out of the way first, just a legal requirement, speaking on behalf of myself and not that of State Farms. Okay, this is the roadmap that we will be following today. I'll start with the problem definition, which is distracted driving, as the title suggests. I'll talk a little bit about the AI solution that we came up with in our research, and obviously conclude with the fun stuff, the results of the experiment. Okay, so why is distracted driving a problem? So you can look at, there are a lot of studies and there are a lot of claims, one of which is distracted driving is the new drunk driving. So how true is that? We'll have to go back to statistics to look at, is it really true? So if you look at the infographic on the right, it's one of the studies which says that distracted driving could probably be worse. If you look at the reaction times, when you're distracted, your reaction times are much slower than when you're drunk. I was pretty surprised to see that. So what does this mean in terms of real-world implications? So if you look at the infographic on the right, the one below there, in 2015 alone, because of distracted driving, we had about 3,500 deaths and 400,000 injuries. And that's not a small number. This was just 1 year because of distracted driving. And 4 years later, I'm assuming these numbers would be worse today. So I think it's safe to say that distracted driving is a real, true existing problem. And that's what we want to see if we can use AI to get some help with it, to prevent it. Okay, when I say distractions, our minds immediately go to texting and driving. But distractions are not just that. It goes beyond just texting. I would say it's classified into 3 broad categories: visual distractions, manual distractions, and cognitive distractions. Visual distractions are those that keep our eyes off the road. So you can think of texting or grooming or something like that. Manual distractions are those that keep our hands off the wheel. Maybe we're texting, or maybe we are eating or drinking something. We all need that Starbucks coffee on our drive to work, right? So, and then cognitive distractions are those that keep our minds off driving. Maybe we are thinking about something else, or listening to the radio, or whatever. So when we define distractions, it's not just texting. It would encompass all these 3 categories. That's how we will define distractions for the purpose of this problem statement. One thing I want to mention here is, once we've defined distracted driving, what it means, why is it a problem, we came up with a hypothesis here that we can use techniques like deep learning, computer vision, and things like that, AI solutions, to look at driver images and create a classification model that would basically look at an image and say what the driver was doing in that image. And that hypothesis is what I will be talking about in the next few slides, about how we went to design the experiment and what the results were. Okay, so a classification model, or any model for that matter, needs good data. We all know that. In our case, the data would be images of drivers that were distracted. That is the data that we're looking for. And one more thing that I have to add is these images would have to be labeled, and correctly labeled. In the sense, we need images labeled saying this driver was doing this action, and label that data in that category, which was a very difficult problem for us because such data set was not available readily online or something we could just tap into. And so we had to create our own data sets. We had to figure out a way to, record these images somehow. And so we designed an experiment again. And here, what we were lucky to have some volunteers help us out with this data collection. So our volunteers, we had about 82 volunteers who agreed to be the actors for our experiment. Essentially, what they would do is they would have to drive and perform certain distracted driving actions in a particular order, and we would have to record their videos, and that is how we would get the data. The obvious problem with that is it's a safety risk. We cannot have drivers do that. And so what we did was we had the car of the driver being pulled by a tow truck. And we had a police escort there as well for safety reasons. And in this case, what we had to do is the driver merely had to act as if they were driving and performing certain distracted actions in a particular order. And so, as an example, the first 30 seconds, maybe they're doing normal driving, the 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock hand position. The next 30 seconds, maybe they were texting. The next 30 seconds, calling, and so on and so forth. And we had them follow that particular order so that we could label the data correctly based on the timing. So yeah, so that was our technique for collecting the data. We had, on the dashboard, we had 2 cameras. One was a 2D camera and one was a 3D camera to record the driver. A 3D camera, for those of you that do not know, is kind of very similar to a 2D camera. It works on some different principles though. But in a sense, it gives you 3 dimensions, x, y, and z coordinates, as opposed to just your x, y in a JPEG image. And the z coordinate measures the depth of the image. Basically, at every single pixel point, what was the depth? So it's additional information, and so we thought, why not? When we are recording, we might as well get both the data. So that's how we recorded the data, and once we had the videos, it was simple from there on. We just had to extract image frames from the video, and that was the data that we would use for a model. So I mentioned that our actors went through certain actions, one after the other, in a serial manner. Distractions, there can be many distractions. This is by no means a complete set or a great set or anything, but we just wanted to prove a concept. And for that reason, we just chose these 8 behaviors. And this is just to say that, okay, we have a starting point, we have some baseline that we can build off of. So the 8 behaviors that we chose to focus on, so safe driving, which would be the standard, and then texting with your left or right hand, calling with your left or right hand, adjusting the radio, eating or drinking something, and reaching for the back seat. So these, we had them follow these steps one after the other. So yeah, so that was the data that we recorded, and our model would obviously have these outputs. It would be a multi-class classification model with 8 outputs, because that's what our model would be trained to predict. You all probably know, when you're dealing with image data, deep learning methods outperform traditional machine learning methods. And so we decided to use a deep learning model. We used a convolutional neural network, which is a specific deep learning algorithm. What you see here is the architecture that we used. This is based off of a very famous architecture in the industry, the VGG architecture, which stands for Visual Geometry Group. And this has a series of convolutional and pooling layers stacked on top of each other. And that's what it's based off of. The only difference is that we did not necessarily have 19 layers as VGG does. We had only 10 layers. And for our data set, we saw that that's kind of what worked the best, or increasing the layers beyond that did not provide a big benefit. Okay, so in the end, we had 2 fully connected layers, and the output after the fully connected layers would be these 8 categories that I just mentioned. So the model would just, the images would just go through each of these layers, and there would be mathematical calculations that happen after every layer, and ultimately your output would be the prediction as to which category your image falls under. The hyperparameters that we used for tuning our models, obviously we had to go through multiple iterations, identify different parameters that we would that would work best for our data. So we used about 200 epochs or cycles to go through our data before it would converge. We also used, I didn't mention here, but we used a GPU. We tried our model on a CPU server first, but the GPU was exponentially faster for us, and so we used a GPU ultimately, and that gave us more time. We were able to train our models within less than an hour, so it gave us more time to actually go through these iterations. And then we had about 72,000 images from both the 3D camera as well as the 2D camera. But we had to break it down into batches of 1,000 images each. And we had to apply batch normalization, which helped us in the way that we didn't have this vanishing gradient problems and overfitting. There were a lot of things that it helped us with. So we went with batch normalization for our case. And we also used stochastic gradient descent as the optimization method. Of course, you can ask me questions about this slide later if you need to. Yeah, so if you remember in the beginning, I had mentioned that we had a 2D and a 3D camera recording these images. And so we ended up building two separate models. Both were deep learning models, but they were separate models. So the hyperparameters and the individual architecture was slightly different, but we had two separate models. So I'm going to talk about the performance of those models in the next slide, but this is kind of how we thought the pipeline would work. So we collected the images from the driver, like I mentioned, the videos, and then converted those into images, and we fed those images into the two separate models, the 2D model and the 3D model. And what we ended up doing is that for every 5 seconds chunk of time, we got the output from both the models. And we would actually aggregate the output and look at the most common action that the images predicted the driver to be doing. And the most common action is what we would predict the driver was doing for that 5 seconds. So our output would be something like what you can see here, like a log kind of an output where it's like the first 5 seconds, okay, normal driving. Next 5 seconds, normal driving. The third 5 seconds, maybe they were texting, and so on and so forth. So that was kind of where we knew that we could use this data to actually predict what the driver was doing. So the proof of concept kind of ends there. But so, I mean, basically we succeeded in proving the hypothesis. That's what it means. But this could be easily extended to an application where, based on the prediction, if the model or the engine predicts that the driver was distracted, then we could easily add an alert or some kind of a mechanism by which the driver can be brought back on track. Maybe the alert is on the cell phone of the driver or some device that the driver would have in proximity. Of course, the only caveat there is that we want to make sure that the alert is not a visual alert, but an audio or beep or something like that. We don't want to distract the driver further. So that's something we want to be cognizant of. The results of the model. What I show here is the 2D model, the 2D data. You can see the confusion matrix and the classification report for the different actions. Overall, the model did pretty good. It was 86.1% accuracy. But if you look at the individual actions, certain actions, the recall wasn't as good, maybe when they were eating or drinking versus reaching back. But for the most part, on an average, it was able to identify the individual actions to a decent level of accuracy and precision and recall. The 3D model, like I said, it had another a model for just the 3D data. And we had anticipated that it would perform better because of the additional information, which included the depth in it. And so it was true. Our accuracy for the 3D model was higher. It was 93.9%. So what we tried was, what if I ensemble the two? Does it just stay the same? Does it just show a slight improvement? But I think it was much higher than either of those models. And one of the things we noticed is it's because it compensates for each of those, the weaknesses of each of those models. And one of the things is as an example, if you think about like images that you take in daylight, which is like a bright, with good contrast and stuff like that, your 2D image might look really good and it might, the prediction might be pretty accurate. On the other hand, if the image is like maybe taken on a duller day or a gloomy day or whatever, and it's not the contrast or whatever is not as good, the 3D model still actually performs well because it's looking at the depth information, which is basically from the infrared ray from the 3D camera. So the brightness doesn't impact the depth information. So there are certain things where the 3D does better than the 2D and vice versa. And so we found that the ensemble worked the best for our case. Yeah, so that was, in summary, we started off with a hypothesis, and basically proving the hypothesis was the research, was the experiment. And we were able to prove that you can use these techniques to build a classification model that predicts the driver's behavior or action when they are driving. And of course, we can extend this by adding one more step, going one step further by alerting the driver, and who knows, probably saving lives in the future. I did want to add this slide because this was a research and by no means something that can be taken to production right away. So one thing that I wanted to mention was there were 3 areas of improvement that would be the next steps that we would take from where we are today in terms of the model itself. One is more robust models. The first step is, if you remember, I spoke about the experiment, how we recorded the data. And it was a pretty controlled setting. It's the same car being towed in the same route, and so that's a very controlled setup. And so obviously, you know, things like the background and those are pretty constant. And so the model is able to, so basically the results that you saw in the previous slide were from the holdout set that we had from our data. But if I had completely changed the car and used it in a realistic scenario where maybe the distance from the camera, the dashboard to the driver is different, or maybe the angle is different, or maybe, you know, the internal, you know, lighting of the car, the pictures are dull or darker or whatever, it might behave differently. So the first step is to basically work on more robust models where we try different cars, maybe different routes. And finally, we also want to talk about the different actions. So we had asked our actors or our volunteers to follow a scripted set. Okay, go through this action and, you know, text with this hand and stuff like that. And they pretty much just followed what we said. And so we want to try with variations of each of those actions. We want to say, okay, what happens if I'm normal driving with one hand on the steering wheel? Or what happens if I'm texting on top of the steering wheel? You know, can the engine catch those things? So that's the first step to making the model more robust. The second thing is more seamless integration. What we have today is multiple devices. There is a camera that's recording the videos, and then we're copying those videos into maybe, you know, connect to a connected system, and then copying that to our server where we run our models and train our models and predict our models. So it's a very kludgy setup because it's just research. So ideally, you want all of that happening in one device. And luckily, with the technology that we have today, you have these Tensor chips which can run really, really powerful models on your cell phone. So you would load this model on maybe a chip like that and have everything that you saw in the pipeline, the recording the videos, converting those into images, passing it through the model, getting the prediction, and getting the final alert back to the driver. Everything happen on your cell phone or some single device and make it as seamless as possible. That would be the next improvement. And the last one, holistic models. What we focused on, and I mentioned the different distraction categories. What we focused on were mostly, I would say, motor skills, things like, you know, that you would do with your hands and maybe your face, looking behind or adjusting something with your hand and things like that. We might want to think at a more micro level, maybe just focusing on the driver's face. Maybe looking at just focused images of the eyes. Maybe is the driver sleepy or drowsy? Those could be distractions. Or maybe the mouth, or maybe they're yawning or whatever. So we could focus in at a more micro level. We could also focus in at a more outside the car level, get telematics information and see is the driver driving patterns giving us some information like lane departures and perhaps, you know, braking patterns of the driver and things like that, which show that they are angry or whatever, which causes distractions. So I think encompassing all of these things as an ensemble of multiple models would actually give us a true distracted driving engine or something, whatever you want to call it. So what we focused on was a subset of the problem on how to handle that by just using one set of data and nothing else. No other telematics speed or no other information, just the images. And so that's what I wanted to share with you all today. Thank you for listening, and I'm open to any questions that you may have now.